Hi, everybody. So I'm Leanne Shinton, and I own Pet Biz Experts, a software CRM company to help dog trainers. And today we are interviewing the amazing Daisy Peel. She's a globally recognized dog agility competitor, coach, and educator. And I'm so excited to jump into your story, Daisy, and learn all about the Agility Challenge, your many podcasts that you have, including the Agility Challenge podcast. And so, welcome. And
Thank
if
you.
you don't mind, introducing yourself, and we can dive into some questions about your story.
Sure. Well, I'm Daisy Peel, and I started agility in 1999, 98 or 99. Oh, so long ago. I was a school teacher at the time, or I take that back. I was not a school teacher yet. I was in between my undergrad and graduate studies. So I had graduated with a chemistry degree, and I was about to start working on my master's degree in math and science education. I didn't have a dog. I wanted a dog. I didn't know what kind of dog I wanted. And I happened to see a TV show called Read All About It on Animal Planet, where they were talking about agility. And I thought, okay, I would like to do that. And I'm going to get a dog to do that. So I started training and competing. And then I got another dog, and then I got another dog. And then fast forward to 2007. So it took me a while to get good enough to win my first national championship and make my first agility world championship team. It was 2007.
Very special. That was pretty
Yeah.
special when you won the national, your first national. What dog was that?
That was a border collie named Jester. He was my first pedigreed border collie. He was my third dog. The first two had been rescues, and he was the first one that I purchased as a puppy to raise and train for competing in agility. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then I got another dog and made another team in 2010. I won the nationals with that dog. I've kind of started to lose track. So I've won multiple national championships, and I've made the AKC Agility World Championship team multiple times. I think 8 times I was counting, with 4 dogs: Jester, Solar, Frodo, Chispa, and Dude. So 5 dogs. I just made the team again last weekend. So 2007, 2010, 11, 12, 16, 18, 2019, and 2025. So this is my 8th year on that particular team.
And when, just so our viewers and listeners know, when you make the team, do you get to compete in the other countries?
Yes. So you travel with the team, and you travel to World Championships. It's always in Europe. It's always in the fall. This year it's in Sweden, and I've been to multiple countries in Europe. Many of them have taken me with the World Championships, but I've also gone over for other competitions and gone over to train and visit friends and stuff like that. So the dog agility has taken me a lot of places in the world.
That's fantastic. And it's a lot of stress, huh? Like I've competed in Europe as well, and you're probably 2 decades doing this, and it's such a focus for you, but it's a lot of stress. Maybe you're more used to it now, but I remember just walking out on like the Mondio Ring World Stage, and I felt like my feet were in cement, and I'm like, why am I here? Just maybe gets a little easier the more you do it.
I don't know. It definitely gets easier as I do it. My problem was I never asked myself why I was there, but I did suffer from over arousal. I'd be so excited to be there that I really wouldn't execute appropriately. And also, while I might not have had those thoughts stepping into the ring, there was a fair amount of, now looking back on it, especially the earlier years, I wish I could have gone back to my younger self and told myself to like pump the brakes and just enjoy it, and don't be so wrapped up in I got to get it right. I mean, you do have to get it right, but also, just enjoy the moment and don't be so anxious about what hasn't even happened yet, or worried about what you just did type of stuff. So as I've gotten a little older and mellowed out about it a little bit, I'm looking forward to this year in particular to just enjoy it as it
Yeah,
comes.
Sweden.
Yeah.
And when you travel like that, do you focus on, I'm assuming, competition and then maybe stay a little longer and enjoy and relax and enjoy, the cities?
No,
No?
I'm
No?
not very good at relaxing. Usually I'll go early so that I can get adjusted to the time zone
Yes.
and get my sleep in order before the competition, sleep and nutrition and exercise. So I'll do some sightseeing beforehand, but once I'm done, I just want to go home. I'm not very good at, I don't really know very well how to relax. I don't really enjoy just sitting around relaxing. I've been working for myself for so long it's such a perfect combination of always wanting to do a project and always wanting to be busy and always wanting to do something and being curious about how things work that I get pretty antsy if I have to sit still for too long.
I feel like you just described a border collie to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the personality of a border collie is you. So that is interesting. Now, I just wanted to ask you about like your transition or, such a pivot from working on your master's and your education, science and math to agility.
So I was a chemistry teacher for 2000, maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9 years. So I did teach chemistry, and I was doing the dog agility stuff, and I was teaching dog agility classes in the evenings. So I started teaching agility pretty early. It was just a couple classes a week on one night. I would teach high school, get my high school work done, and then on that particular day, I would drive to the field where I taught and teach a couple of classes. And it was getting to the point where by the time 2007 rolled around, I was pretty consumed with the dog agility. I really enjoyed teaching. I always did. I enjoyed teaching. I really enjoy science. I really enjoyed chemistry. I really enjoyed teaching chemistry. But the other teachers at the school were spending all of their time thinking about the classes they were teaching. And I wasn't slacking, but I wasn't thinking about teaching chemistry 24/7. I was thinking about training dogs and teaching agility 24/7. So I thought, if I am going to do something for the rest of my life, I'd like it to be the thing that I'm thinking about 24/7 anyways. And I got a really amazing opportunity. A friend of mine owned a veterinary clinic that had a training facility attached to it. And she said, well, why don't you come up and work for me? You can be my training director, design the curriculum. Since you're a teacher, you know how to do that and teach classes and then have access to this training facility. And so it was a really nice transition for me because it allowed me to work in the dog training world professionally without having to be self-employed. So I was still a W-2 employee. It was a pretty unique opportunity. And then from there, I did move all the way to self-employed. And that move was 2011. So I spent a few years being a professional dog trainer and manager of curriculum and a board and train program and a bunch of other instructors at a big training facility, and then moved to a full self-employed entrepreneur, I guess you could call it, in 2011.
And so is that where you are? You're in Ohio, right?
Yep. At the time, when I first started, I was in Oregon. I was born and raised in
Okay.
Oregon, and then I was in Washington State for a while. That was where the big veterinary hospital and training facility were located. And then when I went full-time self-employed, I moved back to Oregon, bought some property, moved back to Oregon, and I trained and taught out of that facility. And then in 2022, pretty recently moved to Ohio. And that was primarily for my husband's job opportunities, but also Oregon, the Pacific Northwest is gorgeous. It's very pretty. It's a gorgeous place to live, but it's a little tricky to be involved in dog sports at the national
Yes.
and international level because you have to put a dog on a plane every time you want to go somewhere. And I was getting really tired of that. And the Ohio area, it's very easy to drive.
Perfect.
A 15-hour drive I can get pretty much anywhere east of the Mississippi very easily. So that was a pretty good move for us back in 2022.
That's a lot, though. You had your business there in Oregon. And did you sell it, or just did you have some stuff going online at that stage to migrate to Ohio?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I started on my first online platform. I started in 2011. So when I went fully self-employed, I already was pretty tech savvy, and so I started doing online training at the time, and I started my first membership site way back in 2011. And so that it made the move from Oregon to Ohio, from Washington to Oregon, and then Oregon to Ohio pretty straightforward. I had some classes that I was teaching in Oregon, and so it was a bummer for those students for me to leave. Um, but the majority of my business by that time was online, so it really was pretty easy to pick up and move.
Can you describe like what your students are like? Mostly women? Are they already in agility and then come to you to learn more advanced concepts, or just starting out? Like, what kind of people are joining into your classes?
Locally, because I do teach private lessons locally, most of my students are local competitors. And most of them come to me for help with pretty basic stuff. Their dog has the zoomies in the ring, or they don't have a sit stay. So I do a lot of work with people on motivation and engagement, the basics of training, the basics of reinforcement, the basics of punishment, the basics of marker cues, the basics of contingencies and things like that. I don't take on novice A students typically who don't have a history of dog training because they wouldn't want to come to me. Because most students who are just getting into the sport, they just want to do it. They want to get their dog on the obstacles. They just want to run a course. And I'm not going to let them do that until they've mastered the fundamentals of good dog training. And most people who get into the sport are not prepared for or interested in the nitty-gritty details of how to actually be a good dog trainer. And so typically, we've got a really strong club community in my area. So I typically refer beginners to the clubs who are teaching classes and stuff, because then they can get their feet wet and they can get their dog on the obstacles. And then if they decide that they have some problems they want to solve, then they usually end up coming out to me.
I like that. Kind of see if it's for them too. See
Yeah.
if they can kind of stick it out. Yeah, that's excellent. And then just for our listeners that don't know, like AKC novice A would be like you're just first starting out.
First
Novice
agility
B,
dog ever.
yeah, novice B, that means you've titled a novice dog
Yeah.
before and you have to go into B. And what's the next level up after novice?
Open.
Open. Okay.
Yeah. And then excellent. And then masters.
And
Yeah.
then they would have A and B if you've already put a title
Yeah.
on that level. Okay. So
Yeah.
I have done a little bit of obedience and rally, so kind
It's
of
very
familiar.
similarly
Yeah.
structured.
Okay. And I was curious about your trips to Europe with the team, the Team USA. That sounds pretty fantastic. Do you guys travel as a team, train as a team?
Typically, when the AKC world championship team has two practices in the States before they travel overseas to the event.
Cool.
So there's typically this year there's a practice in June. I think it's in Utah, and another practice in August that is on the East Coast. So it kind of spreads out the travel burden on the team members. Like, for example, I'll have to probably figure out, I'm not really even sure how to get a dog to Utah in the summer. So I may end up having to drive, which is going to be quite a long drive. But for August, it's a pretty easy drive to get to the East Coast. If a team member's in California, It's going to be a little easier for them to get to Utah, but quite a bit different for them to get to the East Coast. So travel is a big deal in the United States. Teams that are in Europe have it much easier because
Yes.
typical European country is about the size of a state. So it's much easier for them to travel around. They don't have to put their dogs on planes. Some of them never have. They go to world championships, their dog's never been on a plane. When it comes time for the team to get overseas, we typically all have to travel our own routes because there are only so many dogs that are allowed on a plane, and everybody's coming from their hometown. And then we make sure that everybody has a window of time, a buffer that they can account for, maybe a delayed or canceled flight or, whatever. We meet up overseas. We typically have one unofficial practice that's off-site, an official practice that's on-site, and then the event starts.
Amazing. So exciting. And then is each member scored individually, and then you also have like a team score?
There's an individual event that is the combination of a jumping and an agility round. And then there's a team event, and the team event is the combined score of, I can't quite remember. There's 4 dogs on a team, and I think they drop the 4th score. So it would be 3 agility rounds and 3 jumping rounds that get combined for a high combined team score.
Awesome. It sounds like the U.S. is putting a lot of energy and focus into competing in Europe, which is outstanding because it's not easy to get everybody over there. It's
No,
expensive
and
too.
the courses that you see at those competitions are pretty wildly different than the typical AKC agility course. And so up to about 5 years ago, any preparation for those competitions really happened outside of the context of an AKC agility competition because the courses were just dramatically different. And
Wow.
so you had to kind of prep on your own or go to seminars. Nowadays, the American Kennel Club has a division of agility that's taken off quite a bit called the ISC, or International Sweepstakes class. And those courses, now we have AKC ISC only competitions. So it's an agility competition where the courses are international. Typically, we have them at my property. I'm the show chair for them. So typically we hire a course designer to design courses from overseas.
Wow.
And then send them to the judge of record who we've hired, who is in the States, who can show up and judge on the day of. So they see the courses. Of course, the competitors do not before the day of. But that way we can, in a competitive environment, run the kinds of courses that we expect to see at tryouts and then at the actual events. And so when that happened a few years ago, the quality of Team USA at World Championships went up pretty dramatically. We've done better in the rankings. We've got some individual gold medals in the large dog category, which is the most competitive category. And that's largely due to the work that people like myself have been doing for those AKC ISC competitions. Most of the people putting on those competitions are also competitors who really want to compete overseas. And so they're doing the work to hire the judge, hire the designer, get the premiums out, have a site, and do all of that legwork that most competitors take for granted when you just pay your entry fee and show up on the day of.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you're seeing such improvements still. And any standout moments or lessons that you took from being on Team USA or, just individually for you competing in Europe with your dogs?
There's been so many, I'm not sure I can whittle it down to one standout moment or another. I mean, I guess probably the coolest standout moments would be one year I got 3rd in a round. That was pretty cool. That was back in 2010, a long time ago. And another year I got, I think, 5th, maybe 4th or 5th combined overall in the individual event. So that was pretty cool. In another organization that sends teams overseas for another big European event, I won a gold medal one year. So that was pretty
Wow.
cool. That was in 2011, I think. Can't quite remember. Um, I don't know. Just the whole experience has over and over uh, has been pretty neat.
That's pretty awesome. I find too, like sometimes it's the things that you're training your dog, no one's there, and it's like, oh my gosh, we got it. Those moments too can be pretty wonderful.
Hmm. Yeah, probably my biggest standout event was actually not at one of those world championships, but at a tryouts for them, because I had in 2017, I had a dog. His name was Frodo.
Oh,
We were very prepared. We'd made the team in 2016. We'd gone to Germany and we had run as a demo dog for their tryouts. So I was very prepared for coming home to our tryouts. And then 2 weeks before the tryout, another dog hit him on the trail when we were hiking and tore his CCL. So we couldn't go to tryouts. And he had to have CCL surgery. Um, and then the standout moment was going to tryouts in 2018. So I rehabbed him, had the surgery, rehabbed him, got him back to jumping full height, went to tryouts in 2018 and won, I think, every round but one, maybe. And then in that other round, we got second. So we pretty much blew everybody out of the water at that event and made the team. And the interesting thing about it was it was probably the first time that I went to an event really not having any expectations other than just, I'm so happy to be here because I didn't get to be here last year. And then just sort of being able to reflect on, wow, look what happened to the outcome when I really wasn't focusing on it. So that was a pretty cool comeback event.
it's interesting too. Like a lot of it is just keeping everybody healthy, keeping everybody safe so
Mm-hmm.
that you can, go to that competition and compete. I have a client, a dog training client. He's an Olympic competitor in the long jump. And yeah, he's taught us so much about like, this is the time you're training and you're working on the technical stuff. But as you get closer to the event, you should be ready to go and just bubble wrap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
that's pretty devastating if something happens, but you know, lessons are learned and the nature of the beast.
I would do it again. I would be out there hiking again with the dogs because
Yeah,
that's the best kind of exercise they can get. So I wouldn't have foregone that. But it was a good lesson for me as a competitor, because when you participate in a sport at a high level for a length of time, it can be really easy to let your entire identity become that of a competitor. And that's not a really healthy place to be,
yeah,
because you're not going to be competitive forever. And at any moment you could become not a competitor. So figuring out who you are as a person and making sure that that you as a competitor is not the entirety of it, if that makes sense.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, that is gold information right there.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be fun. Now, you went from competing to mentoring and teaching others. I feel like that would have been a natural progression as a chemistry teacher already and
Mhm.
having that, that passion to teach people. What did that look like in your life to go from competitor to, hey, I'm going to start mentoring and teaching people this?
It was pretty, it happened right away because I was a chemistry teacher, and and people started to get interested in me teaching some classes. It was very easy for me because I really enjoy teaching. And also, as an instructor, as a competitor, you only have so many hours in the day that you can train your dogs. It's only feasible to own so many dogs. And, I don't want to own 20 dogs. And also, you can only train one dog for so many minutes a day. Like, there's a finite amount of training time that you can engage in. But if you're an instructor with multiple teams passing in front of you, you can learn from their experiences as well as your own. So it was very natural for me to want to coach and teach others because I just like teaching. but it was also very self-serving for me as a handler and competitor to be able to observe how things played out for other teams and to be able to draw generalizations from those experiences without having to have my own dogs do that. So that was a pretty easy, I'm not even sure it was a transition. It just, I'm going to do this. And then I was doing it. And I've been teaching for, ever since.
Yeah, that just seems very natural for you. That just you saw it on Animal Planet, and just like you had the blueprints. That's amazing. Any standout students experience that you've had in teaching different breeds, maybe?
I've definitely had some really interesting breeds come across my path that I wouldn't want to own personally because I'm pretty heavily invested in the border collies,
Yeah.
but that I've really enjoyed working with. Like I'm not even sure I can remember what the breeds are, but like a tree walking coonhound or something
Oh, a
like that.
hound?
Like
Wow.
dogs that you just don't see that
No.
often, that you wouldn't think of as being really interested in doing lots of work with a handler, typically billed as more independent. Some of those dogs have been very interesting to get to know from a behavior standpoint. I don't know. I don't really file away this or that student as a standout. I just really primarily enjoy the students who are interested in digging in and doing the work and learning. Those are the ones students who are curious, who are interested in being a little uncomfortable, and who are interested in growth are kind of where it's at for me. I don't really care what level they're at.
And that's something I noticed too. Like when I go to your website, it's very welcoming. Like for me, I've dabbled in agility. I had this one dog and I wanted to try everything. And if I was back in that space and I went to your website, like you're just such an accomplished agility superstar to me. But then I go to your website and I'm like, this is so welcoming. I want to sign up. So maybe let's talk a little bit about how you said you like tech, you're comfortable with tech, so that's a big piece of it, but how you pivoted to the online space and talk about what's available to people so that they can learn from you online.
Right. So one of the big drawbacks of being a teacher is that it's not a scalable enterprise. You only can teach so many hours in the day. And also once you are done instructing, it's gone. So pretty early on, I realized, all right, well, I'm saying the same thing over and over to different people. There's clearly some big picture things here. And that was, back in 2011, things like YouTube were starting to take off. And I don't even remember when Facebook happened, but I mean, of course, I started before Facebook and before YouTube, but those things were starting to get going, and it was starting to become a way of teaching. That the internet connections were getting fast enough for people that that online video instruction was becoming more and more of a thing. So it was pretty clear to me, like, look, I could record myself teaching these concepts to people and then also provide it in a written format. And this is a pretty good way for me to get information out to more people in a scalable way, because live instruction, again, is just not scalable. So that got me going pretty quickly. And also dog agility is a pretty easy way to give asynchronous feedback, where you give them a course, they set up and run the course. And if you give them some tips about where to set their camera, then they can send you the videos and you can review them. And then it doesn't all have to happen live. And so that makes things much more scalable. And then also for people who don't care to have feedback, you can, from a business standpoint, you can provide the content and just, here's the content. I don't have to be there, but you can get this content from me. If you don't need feedback, you don't need to pay as much, but you can still get this information. And so that was pretty clear early on that was going to be a really good way to go for me, and also for people that wanted to connect with me and learn from me.
Yeah, that's so different levels of this interaction with you or just
Yeah.
learning from your videos. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting too for our dog training entrepreneurs that are listening, or really any entrepreneur that's thinking, hey, maybe I could have a course. Um, you know, any challenges that you face or any tips that you could share for people that are maybe thinking of exploring that option for their business?
Well, I mean, I think I'm pretty lucky because I had the sort of the perfect storm of an education background, expertise in my field, and a strong understanding of technology because I currently develop and maintain my own website. I produce all of my own training content. I'm giving all the feedback to my students. I produce and develop and produce all the podcasts, and so all of that stuff is it's just me. I don't have any office staff. It's just me. So I think if somebody these days wants to produce a course that's going to stand out, you really, I think, would be smart to base it off of an area that you are confident that you have some expertise in. Um, because there's so much online content out there and there's so much information out there. Some of it is just garbage. Some of it is just, content for TikTok or content for
Right.
Instagram. There's not really a ton of expertise behind it. There's a lot of marketing expertise, but which is something that I fall short on. I'm not a strong marketer. I'm an instructor. And so I rely on other ways of connecting with potential clients that I really don't want to rely on shouty marketing because that's just not who I am. I'm interested in sharing my expertise with you, and screaming in a room, a virtual room with a bunch of other people screaming that they're the expert on something is, in my mind, for me, is not the way to go.
That's very good advice. So figuring out a specific, strength, like what's
Yeah.
your magnet? What are you really good at? And maybe just
Yep.
focusing on that because there's a lot of saturation out there and a
Yeah.
lot of
There's a lot
crappy
of
stuff
saturation
out
out
there
there. And
too.
to the point where, at this point, I don't even spend any money on Facebook ads or anything like that. It's just not for me. Um, I spend a lot more time, I've spent a lot more time over the years building up an email list and working to maintain contact with people on my email list. I think that's a much more, for me at least, it's a much more reliable, personable way of interacting with people than just social media.
Very good advice. Yeah, it's hard to kind of find your way. It's amazing you've done this all by yourself and figured out the email list works, the social doesn't work, like, and just amazing blueprint that you've created for yourself. And where would people go? Is it daisypeel.com to find out
Yeah.
and sign up?
Daisypeel.com is kind of a portal site. So if you go there, you can jump off to the Agility Challenge webpage. You can jump off to Agility Challenge Acres, which is my facility in Ohio. You can jump off to my podcast page. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can view all the podcast episodes that are available. So that's a pretty good jumping off point. You
I'm
can, there's my blog is there, and my blog is kind of in line with my email list. So if you're interested in the topics that I present on my blog, then, and you don't want to constantly be checking the website, then you can sign up for my email list and then have that content delivered to your inbox.
The Agility Challenge is such a great name, especially for folks like me that are a little bit competitive. I'm like, okay, bring it on. What's the challenge? Can you talk a little bit about that? I just think it's such a great name.
Yeah. I actually didn't come up with that name. A student of mine at the time floated this idea to me. She said, "Oh, I think she was in a 5K challenge or something like that." She said, "I think you should do a challenge." And so that's kind of how the Agility Challenge was born. And it worked out perfectly because the vast majority of people who come to dog agility are not experienced competitors in anything. I certainly wasn't. I didn't do anything competitive before I got into dog agility. And so they are not prepared they may also not be dog trainers or dog handlers. So they're not a dog trainer. They're not a dog handler. They may or may not have animal husbandry skills. And they also don't know how to be a competitor. So they have to learn to train. They have to learn to handle. They have to learn to care for this animal that they have. And they have to learn how to perform. And competing is absolutely performative. It's a performance. So you may want to go and win, but you also need to be able to perform in front of other people, and you paid money to do it. So there's a lot of anxiety that people aren't prepared to deal with.
Yes.
And there are a lot of things you can do to mitigate that anxiety. But also at the end of the day, if your training and handling aren't solid, you have pretty good reasons to be anxious, because you're not going to be able to perform if your training and handling aren't to a certain level. So helping people focus on the mechanics of their training and handling, and then also what that doesn't take care of in terms of performance anxiety, being able to help people get in the right frame of mind to employ the training and handling that they've done once they get to the performance ring, is kind of all what the agility challenge aims to do.
That's
It's a lot.
fascinating. Yeah, yeah. I mean, in Mondio Ring, there's so many like competitions to qualify, and you go all the way to the world level. I think a big part of it is also accepting the losses and, accepting the bad days and having a strong mindset to, you know, keep that positive, even though it's like kind of a bummer.
Well, and not just being positive about it, but being able to be analytical about why did I not perform?
Yeah.
What was it that I did or didn't do? In what way did I prepare or under prepare? What could I do to be better? And being able to do all that to be analytical and be evaluating without judging. And a lot of people struggle with that as well. They don't want to engage in analyzing or evaluating because they don't really know how to do that without judging.
I think too, sometimes for me anyway, having a loss, sometimes it's kind of good to get kicked in the face a little bit, because if you go in and you keep winning and you keep winning, and then you get to that big competition and you haven't got kicked in the face at all, you might not be ready because
you may not have really any good idea of where you rank.
Yeah. So mindset seems to be a big core part of what you teach.
It kind of has to be, because if you can't get people out of their own minds, it's going to be almost impossible to get them into their bodies and into the real world so that they can effectively train and handle and execute the sport with the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't talked too much about the dogs. I'm a little bit about when you got started. Is there any standout dogs that you wanted to share about? Any stories?
The first dog that I had that really kind of hit the big time was a dog named Solar. So I'd had Jester. He was on the team in 2007, and he was pretty consistent, but not really up to the task of being competitive at that height, that jump height and that level. And I had Solar in the wings. He was born in 2007, so he was pretty young at that time. And when Solar hit the big time, when he was 2.5, maybe close to 3, he started winning national championships. He ended up winning 5 of them, and he was on the world team a bunch of times. He was a pretty cool dog. And at the time, there still wasn't a lot of competition in the States. And so it was pretty easy to blow everybody out of the water, which was cool. But then, like you say, when you go over to Europe and there's 100 dogs like that, you don't really have an accurate read on where you rank. Nowadays in the States, you could have a dog like that. And I do have a couple dogs like that at the moment who are very, very good, probably better than Solar was. But now we're so much more competitive and the training and handling is so much better, generally speaking, that you can go to a competition in the States and on any given day, any given dog in a group of 10 or 15 dogs is going to be a few tenths of a second ahead or behind. So there's not very many dogs anymore, once in a while, but there's not very many dogs anymore at those competitions that are blowing people out of the water, other teams out of the water by 2 and 3 seconds. Now it's tenths of a second or sometimes hundredths of a second. And so when we go overseas, you have a much more accurate idea of where you stand.
It'd be interesting to go back in time and take the skill level and all your experience and
It
everything
was
and say,
terrible.
it,
It was terrible.
but now take what you are now and
Right.
then go back and say, hey, that one dog, like, oh my gosh, I would have done this differently. But,
Yeah.
we got to learn on those dogs and it's the journey.
Yep.
But there's some that pop into my mind that I've had where I'm like, I started out with this great lab I was telling you earlier, and he could do anything. And so we did a bit of everything. And if I had have just focused on one sport, we could have gone all the way. But he got to teach me a lot. I got to learn a lot from all of
Yeah.
that.
I didn't, I got to travel a lot with Solar and I got to compete a lot with Solar. I learned a lot about being a good trainer with Solar, but I didn't learn as much. He was so easy to train that I didn't really learn as much as I have learned from the more difficult dogs that I've had over the years, the ones that are a little quirkier or not as solid in terms of their temperament. Those dogs I've definitely they forced me to get better as a trainer and a manager of behavior than the easy ones.
Very interesting. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. They all bring us along on our journeys. And looking back over your journey, what advice would you give to trainers who want to pursue their passion, want to build something bigger than just, day-to-day dog training, maybe want to build something in their business that they can build it up to sell it and retire off of it, or maybe want to get into dog sports and do something amazing there?
I think it's probably going to be pretty hard these days to have those big, huge launches that just make a ton of money and you're going to just walk off into the sunset and retire.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's more of there's so many voices in the marketplace now that you need to think more of it as a career, maybe with some cyclical launches or, like my membership site is not always open for registration. I open it cyclically just because I don't want to deal with registration all the time. But I definitely would tell people to be prepared to float ideas and have them fail a lot. But you have to prepare the things that you want to put out there, get them to the good enough stage and get them out there. Because if you sit on it until it's perfect, then you'll never get it out there. So there's a lot of stuff that I put out there that is not perfect. It's not complete. It can be updated later. But I just get it out there. And then based on people's questions or their feedback, you can refine it and move forward from there. But if you waste too much time, if you waste time focusing on, well, I got to get this thing perfect and shiny so that it's, my war and peace of whatever, then nobody will ever see it but you. Probably.
Yeah.
So don't get too hung up on perfection for sure.
Yeah, we lose so much time trying to make things perfect. I talked to a trainer yesterday and she put out this amazing video just, as folks are getting signed up for her programs. And it's just, I'm like, wow, this is the best. She's riding a horse and there's a dog and there's just all this different movement and everything. I'm like, wow. And she's like, yeah, I shot that video over the course of 2 years. But it took me one
No way.
one afternoon in 2 hours, she put together this amazing video. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she probably could have done that. And she knows, but that's our journey. So I love that advice. Just spend an afternoon and just get it out there and get feedback, make it better. Such great advice. Doesn't have to be perfect.
When it comes to video content, there's some things that I really try to focus on, make sure that the camera angle is good enough that people can see what I'm trying to teach, make sure that the audio is good enough that they can hear what I'm trying to teach, follow solid pedagogy when it comes to how long a video should be to keep people's attention, or, break it up in chunks the way that people can learn from it. But it doesn't need to be in perfect focus. The background does not need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be flashy. You don't need perfect transitions, because in my mind, at least, I assume that you are wanting to be a client because of the way that I can help you learn, not because of how flashy my videos are, because I'm not teaching video editing. I'm teaching dog agility and mindset and competitive stuff.
Excellent. Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to share today?
I'm trying to think those other questions that you had sent me.
I know I kind of have a bit of a conversation that gets off in the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know. I think if I had to go back and do it all over when I was getting my chemistry degree, I wish I had taken a few courses in business. I figured it out eventually, but I think if you're an entrepreneur and you're wanting to be in the space, having an interest, whether you enjoy doing it or not, an interest in marketing, an interest in psychology, an interest in how people behave, an interest in all of that other stuff outside of, it's easy for me. Dog training is behavior, and I'm pretty interested in behavior. I'm pretty interested in behavior modification, and that's what marketing is, basically. So just staying curious and being interested in that stuff, and also really figuring out what your voice is and not trying to just be someone else's voice is going to be critical. Someone out there will listen. There's a lot of people out there, and you don't need a huge following to do what you love and also pay the bills.
Yeah, and I love your business model. Like I said, it's almost like you just followed a perfect blueprint. I'm sure it doesn't feel that way, and it sounds like you definitely can appreciate, the journey where, it's the hard times. And it's like, because that taught me and gave me grit.
And there are clients that I don't want. That's the other thing. There are people who I am not a good fit for, and I really don't want those people to spend their money and then realize that it's not a good fit, because I would be annoyed if I did that. And so I try to be mindful of, I don't want everybody's money. I don't want everybody as a client. And there are a fair number of people who will be better served with someone other than me. And that's totally fine. So being aware of that and just being able to be upfront about it and not take it personally when someone realizes maybe later than they should have that you wouldn't be a good fit. Figuring out ways to put your voice out there so that people know before they spend money on you as a client, whether you'll be a good fit. Those things are all pretty important to me now. And though most of those things for me, again, they can't be communicated in a Facebook story or a Facebook. It's the accumulation of, years now at this point of me putting stuff out there, not because I really care to attract a lot of people as clients, but because I want to share what I know. And for some of you, you're going to be interested enough to want to know more. And that's enough.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And I think that's something that we face as trainers, maybe as baby young trainers. We want to take on and help everybody, but it definitely helps to set boundaries and understand what your ideal client looks like, and knowing in a kind way why we say we're not the right fit, but also how to say it in a very nice, kind way. And that was great. Like
I'm
genuinely
pretty forward about it nowadays. Like I'm pretty direct. I'm pretty blunt. I'm not trying to be hurtful, but I don't want you to waste a second more of your time on me if I'm not the right fit, because you are a busy person. Whoever you are, you're busy. You may have kids. You've got a job. You've got a life. Dog training is probably not your entire life. So please do not waste any more time on me. Like, it's just, time is the only commodity that we have that we can't make more of. And once we spend it, it's gone. So I really am keen to help people invest if they want to invest in me, great, let's do it. And if it's not a right fit, it's not a good fit. There's someone out there who's better for you than I am.
Great advice. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Because you've definitely had some amazing conversation here.
I don't know. What other questions do you have? I can talk and talk and talk.
I think everything you've shared so much gold, information today. I think it can help people. And I think maybe just sharing where they can find you, again, just talking about your website and the best way to reach out and where to get started with you to learn more, because it'd be really cool if hopefully some of my listeners will take a journey over and want to learn from you.
daisypeel.com is the easiest way. You can email me if you want to email me or sign up for my email list. Go to daisypeel.com. Every single page has a way for you to get on my email list. My email's very easy. It's daisy@daisypeel.com. And that's the best jumping off point. Yeah.
Perfect.
You can read through the blog, see if any of it resonates with you. And if it does, I got more where that came from.
Awesome. And for everybody too, it's peel, P-E-E-L.
Just like a banana peel.
Yep.
DAISY, the flower and the banana peel.
Perfect. Easy to remember. So everybody visit daisypeel.com. Thank you so much for sharing today. I have learned so many wonderful things, and it's just amazing to hear about your experiences. So thank you everybody for listening. Again, I'm Leanne Shinton from Pet Biz Experts, a software CRM company for dog trainers. And thanks again, Daisy.
Anytime.